What happens when a veteran journalist finally loses patience with royal spin and selective storytelling? Today, we're breaking down the shocking moment that stunned live viewers and sent social media into meltdown. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Have you ever seen an interview spiral this fast? I read every one, and your thoughts helped this channel grow. The stage was set at Good Morning America. Cameras rolled, lights glowed warm and inviting, and across from George Stephanopoulos sat Prince Harry. Calm, poised, and ready to talk about his latest charitable mission. The promos promised a friendly chat on mental health and philanthropy. But George had other plans. What Harry didn't know was that Stephanopoulos had come prepared, armed with weeks of research, public contradictions, and a steely resolve to ask the questions everyone else had sidestepped. "Your Royal Highness," George began, his tone courteous but unmistakably sharp. "You've long spoken about the need for privacy. Yet, here, you are more interviews, another documentary, a second book. How do you reconcile this with the privacy you claim to crave?" Harry's practiced smile slipped for the briefest second. "I think there's a difference between having your privacy invaded and sharing your truth on your own terms," he said. George leaned in. "On your terms," he repeated. "But is this really about advocacy? Or is it about control? Because it looks a lot like you seek privacy when it's convenient and publicity when it pays." A flicker of disbelief crossed Harry's face. This wasn't the American media he was used to. "Everything I've done," he replied, voice tight, "has been about telling the truth and shining a light on important causes." "Your truth," George cut in. "You've made heavy accusations against your family. People who don't have the luxury of answering back." "Do you ever think about their side?" Harry bristled. "They've had decades to tell their side. Through tabloids, palace sources, carefully placed stories. They're protected, George." "I wasn't protected," George challenged. "Because what the world has seen is a royal family largely silent, while you've done interview after interview, painted them in increasingly harsh terms. Where is their right to privacy? Their right to dignity?" Harry's jaw set. "They have the British establishment at their back. I had to fight for my voice or be erased by lies." George didn't flinch. "But were they lies, or just truths you didn't like? There's a difference between false reporting and uncomfortable facts. A lot of what you've called invasions were simply headlines about choices you made." Harry leaned back, visibly agitated. "You're oversimplifying. The media has a history of attacking women in my family. They destroyed my mother, and they were doing the same to my wife." "Diana's story was tragic," George said softly, "but Meghan's situation wasn't the same. She faced criticism, yes, but the kind every royal spouse has endured. Were you expecting different treatment because she's American? Because she's biracial? Because she represented something new?" Harry stiffened. "That's exactly why we were treated differently." "That may explain some of it," George acknowledged. "But can you really say all the negative coverage was racism? Can you really say none of it was earned? Because from where I sit, any criticism becomes racism. Any scrutiny becomes a lie. At what point do you take responsibility?" The room went still. The question hit like a thunderclap. Harry's face flushed. His hands tightened around the arms of his chair. "George, this line of questioning is completely out of bounds. I came here to talk about my work, not to be ambushed and have my family dragged through the mud. But the ambush was already underway, and the fallout was just beginning. I'm not attacking anyone," Stephanopoulos said evenly, his voice calm but firm. "I'm asking the questions millions of people have wanted answered. Questions that too many journalists have been either too polite or too intimidated to raise. You've made yourself a public figure. You've written books, given interviews, made accusations. That comes with consequences, and those consequences deserve scrutiny." Harry's voice trembled slightly as he fired back. "And this This exact kind of interrogation is why we had to leave. It's hostile. It's judgmental. This is what drove us out of Britain. George didn't flinch. American journalism is different, he replied. We don't bow to crowns or titles. We ask hard questions, whether someone is royal, famous, or just rich. Nobody gets a free pass. So here's the hard question, Harry. Do you ever take responsibility? Or is it always someone else's fault? A heavy silence fell. Camera operators looked at one another. Producers froze in the control room. And across the country, viewers leaned in, watching Prince Harry squirm in what had become the most brutal interview of his public life. Harry finally answered, jaw clenched, voice taut. That's a loaded question, George. But yes, I take responsibility. I took responsibility when I served in Afghanistan. I took responsibility when I left Britain to protect my family. Every major decision I've made has been rooted in doing the right thing. By my family and myself. Stephanopoulos gave a slow, skeptical nod. Those are big picture decisions. But I'm asking about the small ones, the ones that built the public perception you now say is unfair. No one forced you to party in Vegas. No one forced you to wear a Nazi costume. No one made you say things about your military service that offended veterans. You made those choices. Harry's eyes darkened. I was young. I was grieving. I was struggling with mental health issues. I've owned those mistakes, repeatedly, but they don't define who I am today. Fair enough, George replied, not missing a beat. But what about the recent decisions? The Oprah interview aired while your grandfather lay dying in a hospital. Your Netflix doc dropped, just as your family was mourning your grandmother, and your father was stepping into the role of king. Did you ever stop to consider how those choices would land? The words hit like a punch to the chest. Harry leaned forward, voice rising in defense. We had contractual obligations. These projects were years in the making. We couldn't just cancel everything because of palace drama. Contractual obligations, George repeated, his voice edged with disbelief. So your Netflix deal was more important than your family. Your book deadline's more important than showing a shred of grace during a time of grief and transition. That's not what I said, Harry snapped. You're twisting my words, just like the British tabloids always did. I'm not twisting anything, Stephanopoulos said coolly. I'm quoting your own explanation. You said your hands were tied by contracts. That sounds a lot like choosing money over relationships. Is that unfair to say? Harry ran a hand through his hair, visibly rattled now. George, you don't understand what it was like. We had to secure our future. We had no support, no income, nothing from the palace. We had to survive. We had to protect our children. George raised an eyebrow. No support. Your father continued to fund you after you stepped back. Your grandmother left you millions. So when you say no support, what exactly do you mean? Harry's tone sharpened. Support with conditions. Control. Manipulation. We were told to stay quiet, to play along. That's not support. That's a leash. Stephanopoulos tilted his head. So you traded palace control for Netflix executives and book publishers. You're still answering to someone. You've just swapped one system for another. How is that better? Harry shifted uncomfortably, voice cracking with frustration. Because now we choose the message. Now we decide what to say and when to say it. Now we have our voice. Our truth. Your truth, George repeated. But what happens when your truth contradicts documented facts? What happens when your memory clashes with official records? Or with someone else's version of events? Like when you claimed in your book that your brother physically attacked you. Are we supposed to take your word as gospel, even when there's no way to verify it? Harry sat frozen, fury and disbelief warring behind his eyes. And in that moment, it was no longer a celebrity interview. It was a reckoning. But you also admitted, Stephanopoulos said, that you had been drinking and were emotionally distraught. How can viewers fully trust your account of the altercation when even you admit your mental state was compromised. Harry's face turned a shade deeper, his fury barely contained. "Are you calling me a liar, George?" he snapped. "Are you saying I imagined the attack?" Stephanopoulos remained composed. "I'm saying memory is fallible, especially under emotional stress. I'm saying your version of events might be shaped more by grievance than by fact. Presenting a subjective experience as objective truth can be misleading and dangerous." Harry gave a bitter laugh. "Dangerous? No. What's dangerous is the system that protected their image while it shattered mine. The press ignored their missteps, exaggerated mine, and fueled a racist, sexist smear campaign against my wife, and no one stopped it." Stephanopoulos seized the opening. "Let's talk about that. You've made serious allegations about racism inside the royal institution, but when asked for details, you've stayed vague. You mentioned a conversation about your son's skin tone. No names, no context, no proof. Why should the public believe such explosive claims without evidence?" Harry's hands clenched the arms of his chair, knuckles pale. "I've chosen not to name names because I'm still protecting them. That doesn't mean the conversations didn't happen. It doesn't mean the racism wasn't real. But it also doesn't prove it was racism." Stephanopoulos countered, voice calm but unyielding. Could it have been clumsy curiosity? Families speculate about unborn babies all the time, without context. How can anyone know whether it was prejudice or just poorly worded family chatter? Harry's voice came through gritted teeth. "Because I lived it. I watched Meghan suffer. I saw what it did to her, isolated, demonized, broken. That pain was real." Stephanopoulos nodded. "The pain is real, yes. But pain doesn't always equal racism. Struggling to adapt to royal life doesn't automatically mean discrimination. Every woman who's married into that family has faced pressure. Your wife, your brother's wife, even your father's. Why is Meghan's experience uniquely about race?" The question hit like a body blow. Harry's expression froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. The studio air grew thick with silence. The confident, polished Duke who had entered the room was gone, replaced by a man visibly cornered. When Harry finally spoke, his voice was low, barely above a whisper. "You don't understand, George. You can't possibly grasp what we endured. The harassment, the cruelty, the subtle digs, the isolation. You weren't there." George leaned back slowly, maintaining his even tone. "Then help me understand. Give me one clear, documented example of institutional racism you personally witnessed. Names, dates, circumstances. Something the world can evaluate for itself." Harry's eyes darted toward the cameras, toward the crew, almost as if searching for an exit. "I've said before, I'm not naming names. I'm still trying to protect members of my family. But the pattern was undeniable. The tone was different. The press coverage was harsher. It was biased." Stephanopoulos nodded slightly, but his expression didn't soften. "Those are broad claims, Your Royal Highness, but the accusations you've made were very specific. They've damaged reputations, destroyed trust, sparked international fallout. Are you prepared to take full responsibility for the consequences of those allegations, especially if the world never sees the evidence behind them?" Harry didn't answer right away. And in the silence that followed, it was clear this wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a turning point. What started as a high-profile sit-down quickly spiraled into one of the most intense and emotionally raw interviews in royal history. When Prince Harry sat across from George Stephanopoulos, no one expected the polished facade to crack so violently. But by the end, it had completely shattered. It began with a challenge. "Surely, you owe the public more than vague references to patterns," Stephanopoulos said pointedly. Harry's royal composure snapped. "I owe the public nothing." He shot back, his voice rising. "I've given enough. My service, my privacy, my peace. I will not be interrogated like a criminal for protecting my wife and children." But Stephanopoulos didn't back down. "You're not being treated like a criminal. but you are a public figure who's made public accusations and profited from them. The public has a right to ask questions. At that, Harry stood abruptly, the screech of his chair cutting through the studio silence. "This interview is over," he declared. "I won't be ambushed by someone with a clear agenda against me and my family." But Stephanopoulos stayed calm. "Please sit down, Your Royal Highness. Millions are watching. Walking out now will only make it look like you can't defend your claims." For a moment, Harry just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes furious, before slowly sinking back into his seat. "Fine," he muttered. "But let the record show. This is not the interview I was promised." "And what were you promised?" Stephanopoulos asked quietly. "One without hard questions. One where no one holds you accountable." "That's not journalism, Prince Harry. That's public relations." Harry's voice wavered. "I was told this would be about mental health, about my charity work. But instead, all you've done is attack me personally. I've asked you to explain your own statements, made in your own book and in your own interviews." Stephanopoulos replied firmly. "If those statements contradict each other, that's not my fault. That's your inconsistency." The blows kept landing. Stephanopoulos laid it bare. "First, you said you and Meghan were trapped and had no choice but to leave. Then you claimed you were financially cut off. But now we know your father supported you and your grandmother left you millions. So which is it?" Harry's face turned red. His voice cracked. "All of that can be true at the same time. It was complicated." "Or," Stephanopoulos countered, "your story changed depending on what served you best. First, you were victims. Then you were survivors. Now you're global entrepreneurs. Every version worked. But they can't all be true." Harry slumped in his seat, the fight leaving his body. "Why are you doing this, George?" he asked softly. "Why tear me down on live TV?" For the first time, Stephanopoulos' tone softened. "I'm not trying to tear you down. I'm trying to find the truth. You've positioned yourself as a whistleblower. If what you've said is true, it will stand up to scrutiny. If not, the public deserves to know." The Harry's voice dropped to a whisper. "And if this ruins what little I have left with my family, that relationship was already damaged," Stephanopoulos said. "Your book, your interviews, your documentaries, they did the damage. Today we're just asking whether it was justified." Silence fell over the studio. Harry stared at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glossy. "I just wanted to protect my wife and kids. I wanted to give them a better life. I wanted to break the cycle." "That's admirable," Stephanopoulos replied. "But were the accusations, the fallout, the scorched earth approach truly necessary? Could you not have protected your family without destroying theirs?" Harry looked hollowed out. He took a breath. "I don't know," he said at last. "I honestly don't know anymore." Stephanopoulos nodded. "That may be the most honest thing you've said today. And maybe, just maybe, that's where healing begins." Moments later, the interview ended. No handshakes, no smiles, no closing remarks. Prince Harry walked off set without a word. His carefully controlled narrative left in tatters after 30 minutes of unrelenting truth-seeking. Millions watched, stunned, as one of the world's most recognizable figures was finally cornered by hard questions he couldn't spin his way out of. What did you think of this confrontation? Was Stephanopoulos just doing his job, or did he cross a line? Was Harry brave, or just exposed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more explosive celebrity moments you won't see anywhere else.